All right, guys. Thank you for coming. I'm Erin Moulton. I think we'll get started. We are not the public space talk, just so you know. We are Things We Haven't Said, Sexual Violence Survivors Speak Out. And this is written by anthologist survivors who experienced sexual violence as children and adolescents, so between the ages of 4 and 19. So it can get a little heavy at times, obviously. I think it's important to say if you feel like you need to take a break while we're going through our stories and conversation, please do that and take care of yourself. We're super not judgy, right? No? So just take your space if you need it. There are bathrooms that way, I hear, and there's certainly many books to browse. So I want to just introduce a little bit about the project, and then we're going to hear from our amazing survivors. This project was born from working with the kids at the public library. I'm a teen librarian. And basically one day what happened was I was doing a filmmaking program, and the kids said, oh, actually, sorry, I just looked at Lizzie. Before we jump into that, Lizzie, I want you to tell us a little bit about Canva. And the reason I do this is at the beginning of every single program, I have somebody that's from a local advocacy center come up and talk about their resources and programs. And so Lizzie, why don't you come up and do that, and then I'll tell my story. And one thing we're going to do tonight is if you would like to buy a book for Canva, then you can do that. And it's 10% off if you do that. So if you don't feel like buying a copy for yourself, you don't need one. There are certainly people who could use it. So come on up and tell us a little bit about that. You can use this one, and then I'll just take it right back.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzie. Thank you so much for having me. This is an incredible opportunity to be able to come to speak with some of you. I work for Canva, which is a nonprofit based in Brooklyn. Canva has 6 major program areas, which are health, housing, legal, family support, education and youth development, and economic empowerment. I specifically work with the Violence Prevention and Intervention Services program. So what that means is I provide education and awareness on domestic violence and sexual assault. So I brought with me a few things. There's 2 brochures. We have a rape crisis services program, which includes a 24-hour confidential hotline. And then we also have a victim assistance program, which helps provide services, referrals, making claims with the New York State Office of Victim Services. So any information that you may need is over here. And we also have pens, and I'll be around. So if you have any more questions or feel like you need to talk with me, then I'll be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the origin story. We were working with the teens at the public library, and I had split them up into groups to do a movie making brainstorm. And basically what happened was I heard just the word rape and then laughter from the other side of the room. And I wasn't right over the group, so I wasn't sure the context of it, and I started to make my way over. And as I did, one of the kids, the girl in the group, said, hey, some of us have bad memories. So she basically addressed it. I felt like I fumbled and was unable to address it. I redirected them. I said, let's move on, and it kind of just diffused, and, we went along with our day. Later that year, I was weeding the nonfiction section, and I started to look around and say, okay, what resources are there for teen survivors of sexual violence? And I noticed there were a lot of resources for adults, and there were less for teens, or they were very focused, like it was just, sexual abuse. There wasn't anything that I was like, okay, I would definitely give that to a kid, and what would that look like? What would a book like that look like? So I thought about it, and then I made a proposal, and then I reached out to RAIN Speakers Bureau and the Voices and Faces Project, letting them know I was looking for a diverse group of survivors to speak on this topic who had survived juvenile sexual violence. And people came in droves and said, I have a story to tell, and we wrote a book. So you're going to hear pieces of that book tonight, and what it is it's components, it's a creative component. So every survivor wrote their story in their own words. It could be a poem, it could be a vignette, it could be a letter, it could be an essay. It could, we were pretty open about what format. And then there was also a component, I didn't want to just leave it with the creative because I wasn't sure where we would be at the end of the creative. Some, if you write a letter to the perpetrator, that's going to be an angry letter. And there are some of those in the book, and they're amazing. But then I wanted right after that to have a question and answer component. So we could talk about where are you now? Like what's happening now? What'd you do for recovery? How's it going? And what resources are out there? And I think we have some really great in-depth conversations in that section. So, and then in the back of the book, one of the main things I was noticing throughout the book was a language barrier. And so there's a dictionary of definitions in the back. There's also hotlines for help. There's statistical information, all of that in the back of the book. So by way of introducing a little bit about the book and my survivors, I'm going to just read a very small component of the introduction, and then I'm going to give the floor to you guys. Okay? So I want to talk about some through lines that emerged while I was working on the project, and some of them will seem very familiar, but I think they bear repeating again and again and again. So that's what I'm going to read from. And yet, as I put this book together, a few through lines emerged, and I'd like to share those with you now. First of all, the majority of perpetrators were known to the victims. We often think of rape as something done by a violent stranger in the dark of the night, but this is a myth and not a reality. National statistics bear this out. Several studies have shown that perhaps 3/4 of sexual violence involves an offender who is a family member, intimate partner, friend, or acquaintance. In this book, Aster, Laura, Shannon, and Ella were abused by their fathers. Maya's perpetrator was a cousin from hell. Carius was assaulted by Uncle Al. Meanwhile, Allison knew the guy from school, and Stephanie was raped by the neighborhood boys, and on and on. All of these stories clearly show that rape happens within communities, at home, and in places where kids live, play, pray, and learn. Second, many survivors said they had no language to define the incident. In other words, as children, the survivors didn't have the words or understanding to identify what had happened as rape, incest, abuse, or assault. But of course, as we develop, we learn words in our homes, schools, and communities. But if abuse is normalized at home and the subject is stigmatized in society, then how will a child know that she or he is being or has been abused? Knowledge is power. Communication is power. Words are power. If you can learn these words, you can wield them. Third, many survivors were disempowered by more than just the perpetrator. For Dina and Shannon, it was when they spoke to a trusted adult and weren't believed. For Joan, it was when she was told she was asking for it. For Lorena, it was when she passed a graphic note in class, and instead of investigating further, the teacher handed the note straight to her abuser, her stepfather. For Stephanie, it was when she reported to the police, and she was interrogated as if she had committed the crime. For Don, it was when the court decided it was too stressful for him to continue testimony. People in power can oftentimes fail the victims. They can be disbelieving adults, poor peer allies, biased police officers, and apathetic teachers. These people may miss speaking up or even listening when given a chance, or they may even send the person straight back into the perpetrator's hands. And yet, for the contributors in this book, their power is back. Here they speak. Here we listen. Perhaps the act of listening can be as empowering as the act of speaking. Perhaps the act of reading can be as empowering as the act of writing. I believe this to be true. So in the spirit of listening, I'm going to invite Barbara to start us out. Here you go, Barbara.
Hi. Hi. I wrote
Stand
a.
or you feel comfortable sitting?
I'm good sitting.
Okay.
Yeah. I wrote a letter to my 14-year-old self, and I'm going to read it for you. Dear Barbara, you've just been through something so horrific, words cannot describe it. And I know you're not going to tell anyone for a long time. Your body has been through a trauma that very few people can understand. You are very badly bruised, and it's going to be difficult to hide it, but you will. Understand that you should be in a hospital right now, and they probably would keep you for several days. You'll never be this physically hurt again in your whole life. You'll actually use the enforced modesty to make sure that nobody sees all the bruises on your torso. Take care of my beautiful you. I know that you're battling feelings of guilt and shame because you believed that your rapist was your boyfriend and that he cared about you. Make no mistake, he is your rapist. Anytime someone forces you into a sexual situation, it is rape. When someone holds you down and beats you during a sexual experience, it is rape. When someone uses you in ways that will only harm and degrade you, it is rape. Coercion is never foreplay, and forcible intercourse, oral, anal, or vaginal, is always, always rape, without exception. When he told you that you caused his actions, that is untrue. You didn't make him do anything. Anything he said after it was over was bullshit. People do what they want to do. I know that right now you have a sense of betrayal and the feelings that the people who were tasked to protect you, your parents, didn't do their job. They're not capable of protecting you, and they'll blame you for their failings. And this is going to affect the way you see love and intimacy for a very long time to come. And your family is also not going to understand, but you'll find allies where you least expect them. One day, I think in May of your sophomore year, Marie, that girl that lives over on Central, will walk up to you and ask you to talk. She'll tell you that she was nearly harmed in the exact same way by the same boy, and you and her will become friends for the rest of your life. And she'll be with you the day you get married. She'll be with you the day your first child is born, and she'll be the first person you call when your mother dies. You're going to grow into a changing world. People don't see rape the same way in 2016 as they do in 1977. The world will change. People's beliefs about what constitutes rapes will change. And better yet, you're going to be a part of that change. You're going to become an activist and an advocate for the rights of survivors. However, some things won't change. As far as your parents go, your mother will be cold and judgmental, and your dad will have a very small mind for a long, long time. And I'm sorry to say that you can't expect understanding for many years. But it will come, and you will be the arbiter of that change. Right now, home is not a happy place, but please know that you're not the problem. They're a mess, and it's not your responsibility. For now, I want you to know a few really important things. You are strong. You're positively unbreakable. And although things seem dark, you're going to pull through. Life will delight and astonish you. You'll see beautiful places and have amazing experiences. You'll fly on private planes all over the Caribbean. You'll go to shows during New York Fashion Week. You're going to make short films, finish college and graduate school. But most importantly, you will have two remarkable sons. These boys will cause you incomparable wonder and raise the bar on how much love you can have for another human being. And they will piss you off like nobody else. Kathy, Bridget, and Nancy will give you 4 beautiful nieces and 5 nephews, each completely different from the next, and you will adore every one of them. You'll become an accomplished woman, interesting, smart, funny, charming, sexy, and sophisticated. Yup, yes you really will. You will have your watercolor paintings of the ocean exhibited. You'll become a remarkable cook, have a lovely home, coach Little League, watch all kinds of sports, and travel to fantastic places. Cities so majestic they will make you gasp. Caves on beaches and Virgin Gorda with rocks in the colors of the rainbows. Remember, I'm the 53-year-old you. I was there when all this happened. So please, please be patient with yourself. I can't change the past, and surprisingly, I wouldn't if I could. What I would do, if I could, is take the pain away. I would do that in a minute. But sitting here where I am nearly 40 years later, you're going to come to own your experience without shame. What will happen is that you will become part of the movement. You'll become a warrior for others and work to help survivors heal and tell their stories. Trust and believe there will be hope and healing. And after you heal yourself, you'll go one step further. You'll bring your healing to others. And it will bring you a great sense of purpose and make you feel whole. And most of all, you will be happy. You will be a happy woman. All the love in the world, Barbara McLean.
My name is Don Cribbs. I'm one of the 3 male survivors that are represented in this project, and I'm going to get up and move over there. So my name is Don Cribbs, and I'm going to just introduce who I am, where I'm coming from, and then I'll do a little bit of reading. I have a poem in this book, but I have been working at this for a while. So prior to this project, I had the privilege of publishing a young adult novel that is now out of print. So you can't get this. Sorry. Not yet, unless, you want to talk to a publisher. I'll talk to you. So this project came out. It was a labor of love. It took 5 years. And then it was out for about 5 months, and then the publisher went out of business, as happens in this industry, as you may know or not know. So this is a young adult book called The Packing House. It's essentially a fictionalized version of my survivor story. And I think it's a needed book that's out there. So I'm going to share a poem from it, and then I'm going to share the poem that's in this book as well, if that's okay with everyone. So this is called Worms in the Summer Grass. Worms in the summer grass. It isn't that far into June when the heat stings soft spring away, and my family migrates to the sticky lake to cool ourselves beneath the shade of a beach umbrella. Rusted fish hooks and burnt grills surround the lake like ants around a rotting tree. The sky floats across the water as I rub my hands on wet grass, dripping sweat and bugs. Silence unnerves me. He brings us here like a family affixed, but the worms and I know differently. He rocks on waterlogged sneakers near lake weeds where the mosquitoes hover and snails are born. I concentrate on threading a dying worm and imagine it's him. The ground around makes a sucking sound, like a dry drain. I sip from an empty can, praying he slips into the water. He sits away from us, over where the boy from Rochester Farm choked and died a few years back. I never knew that boy. At some point, his presence wakes me. He hovers over the bed. I notice my sheets peeled back toward the wall. Encumbered by his weight, I await the end, clenching my eyes as his hand holds on to the mattress. My line jerks, and I reel in a throwback. I wait until nightfall when we will travel back to the house, and I will scrub ground worms from beneath my fingernails, and he will come into the bathroom to pee with me. The worm burdened around the rusted hook. So, as I said, my name is Donald Cribbs. I'm a survivor. Specifically, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. But more accurately, I'm a survivor of sexual assault. For me, this began at the age of 4. So I've been working my healing and recovery for 40 years. At that time, it felt like an ending. And in a way, it was. That's the day the child in me died. But I'm standing here today, 40 years later, and I'm walking through the hard work of my healing and my recovery because I decided it wasn't an ending for me. Instead, it was a beginning. I believe healing is possible. That's what I've found. So I'm honored to share with you something that helped me as a survivor, which is writing, the arts. And I found that music, when I was involved in that, singing in choir, I played saxophone in high school, theater, artwork, and writing as well. So poetry and prose help me. So I'm going to read the poem from this project. If you have your copy, it's on page 62. If you'd like to follow along. I know we're all different kinds of learners, so some people benefit from being visual. All right, so this is called Pinball. And just to introduce this poem, I wrote it because I wanted people to understand who are survivors and also who aren't survivors. If you're loved ones, if you are supporters, if you're allies. It's important to understand what intrusive thoughts are, how they affect us. They can just come up at any time, and it's very invasive, and it feels like it's happening right now, even if it occurred decades ago. So I used the image of the pinball, playing pinball, to illustrate this. Pinball. Pull back and bang. This round arcs. Hammers mind against bumpers. Baling, da ding ding ding. Flashes of flesh. Movement, ripping its way through. Havoc of thoughts too dark to speak. Playing with yourself again, I see. Questions bring up a flood of shame. Staccato reply to shrug it off. Everything is fine, and you? I deflect shiny metal balls as they ricochet, blades, across my insides, where bleeding hides, staunched by long-buried shards, images of everything he did to me. What was taken rises from deep places. Bile divots, drops target, and I'm back there again. When it happened. Fa-whip, da-ding-ding, flipper bats scrambling to contain, every ball careening down the lanes. Hands on my hip, his mouth whispers near my ear. I'm up next. Now it's on overdrive. Balls fire from all sides. Ba-ding-ding, one slingshots. Da-ding, another through the spinner. The squish of sweat. His haste. Panic trips, rollover switches. Bada-bada-ding, coming in fast. Each flash fires across lamps in the lane, with no apron to stop, as he grinds himself against me. Let's play another round. Thank you. So I'm a counselor now, which is very ironic because I hated counselors when I was a kid. And I actually had issue with that. If you read in my section through the Q&A part, you'll understand there's some things that happened in the court that didn't quite go right. And actually, those who were supposed to help me actually triggered me more by doing the same kinds of things that my abuser did to me. And yet they were the adults, and they should have known that, and I was 4. Now I decided I can't control what happened to me, but what I can do is make sure that when somebody's sitting in the chair with me, that I'm going to be somebody who has awareness that, unlike the way that happened for me. So I do drug and alcohol counseling, and sadly many of my clients have trauma backgrounds, but I'm actually working to eventually work directly with survivors entirely. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, guys.
Hi, I'm Maya, a survivor also, a writer, singer, dancer, everything. That is art. I find art is the perfect way to get in touch with people and open their hearts to see the wrongs and the sickness in our humanity, in our society. And I encourage other people and other survivors to keep speaking whatever way they feel that is right for them and never shut up no matter what anyone tells them. Keep speaking up. Me too, time's up. Time is up. So I'm gonna read my piece now. My piece is written like a diary. Dear diary, I'm 6 years old and I started school, but I hate it. All the kids are so mean to me. It hurts my feelings so much. I just want to have friends to play with. I feel lonely all the time. My oldest sister doesn't like me anymore. She's a teenager, and all she cares about is her friends. What about me? We used to be best friends. Dear diary, something really weird happened today. My male cousin said, "Show me yours and I will show you mine." I didn't understand it and I had no idea why he asked me to take off my underwear. Nobody ever asked me that before. I felt so uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say, so I did what he asked. He said he will play with me. I just didn't want to be alone. I'm always alone. Dear diary, turning 11 didn't make things better either. This monster cousin is always here. He has been sleeping at our house for 2 months now. I'm scared. Every time I see him, I can't breathe because I know what is going to happen. And no one protects me from him or from my oldest sister, who's becoming meaner and meaner by the day. I'm not doing anything to her. I want to die sometimes. I dream about what it's like in heaven. Are pretty butterflies there? Can I fly? I always wanted to fly. Last weekend at Grandma's, he took me into a room, locked the door, but also put the foot on bed at the door. He licked me and forced me to do the same to him. Then he did the same at my parents' house, this week, when he stayed over. It was the worst night in my life. He dragged me out of my room at 1 a.m. and locked me in the attic. Then he laid on top of me after he pushed me on my parents' old mattress. I couldn't breathe. He always put sheets over my face. It's like being in hell and not being able to see anything. I feel dead. Maybe I am. I don't understand anything anymore. I just want to cry. I will write you more tomorrow. I can't stop crying. Dear diary, I cried myself to sleep last night. I want to tell you all that happened because I can't tell anyone else. I mean, sometimes I do want to tell my teacher, but I can't. I'm so ashamed. She probably think I'm disgusting. My cousin from hell, that's what I call him now, said that if I tell anyone what happened, people will think I'm a whore. This word, what if I am a whore? I don't want this guy. I don't want any of this. Last night, what I didn't tell you was, okay, it's kind of hard to say. After he got on me, I think he raped me. I've heard this word before from the TV and from the news, but I don't know exactly what is considered raped. Now I feel confused about what happened. So I Googled the definition of rape, and I understand that I was raped many times. I'm so scared. What if one day he will get me pregnant? I know I don't have a period yet, but I'm 11. I heard girls can get it young. Dear diary, if that ever happens, I don't know what I'll do. That was not the worst of that night, though. He placed me like I was just his toy, and nobody, with no soul, as if I don't feel when he hurts me. He never even talks to me. He just does whatever he wants. Licks me as if I was food. He puts stuff inside of me, and I couldn't walk after. I couldn't pee all night. And it hurts between my legs all the time now. After he finished, at 6 a.m., he just left. I stayed there crying and confused. But then I got up and went to the bathroom in the attic. I washed my hands for half an hour, and I still don't feel clean. Then I started taking little bites of the soap. I didn't care if it was gonna poison me. I felt so disgusting. I just wanted to be clean. Dear Diary, I'm almost 12. That means I'm almost an adult. So I decided to start a crash diet. I read all about it in a magazine. The woman on the cover looks happy and thin. I want to be so skinny, nobody will ever call me fat. I will be popular and everybody would love me. Dear Diary, something amazing happened last week. Maybe because I just turned 14. It started bad when my cousin from hell trapped me in my grandma's room again. He pushed me to the wall and started to touch me. I couldn't breathe. I was so scared that I felt as if the tears in my eyes froze and couldn't even slide out of my eyes. But then, suddenly, I woke up. It was as if God put life in me again and made me able to fight him. I pushed him with my hands and I kicked him right between his legs. He released his grip and I ran out of the room and out of the house. I looked at the sky. It was dark. And I prayed to God and asked him to stop this nightmare. I begged my divine Father to make him stop hurting me. So this is just an edited version of what's in the book to fit here in this time. But I started an organization 2 years ago called Peace Again for survivors of sexual assault. We mostly work just with women right now, but I hope in the future to work with men also. We're doing healing events. I have friends that teach yoga and they come teach yoga for free. And I have some healers from my community that come and give free workshop and tips how to deal with PTSD and complex PTSD. And then I teach meditation. I also wrote a book that is called Peace Again, and I'm working on publishing it right now. It has a lot of, it's kind of biography with spiritual journey, and I teach my own spiritual exercises there and meditation. And also a lot of reflection of other big authors and leaders like Jackie Kennedy and Martin Luther King. So I'm feeling motivated right now with all the Me Too to publish it too. And thank you all for coming here.
My name is Jane, and this is my piece. It's called Reclamation. And this is how it starts. We're halfway through this cheap bottle of wine. You and I have both seen Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone at least 3 dozen times, and don't think I haven't noticed your hand on my thigh. And I can read you like Shakespeare, which is to say, better than most and improving with practice. And I know damn well that I'm 2 kisses to your neck away from the hitch of your breath, and this is how it starts. Someone once told me that if you're going to write a poem about sex, people should have to wonder if it's about sex. Maybe if I were classier or a better writer, I could write that poem, but this is not that poem. This is the moment that comes approximately 27 minutes, 4 position changes, and 2 not quite simultaneous orgasms later, but we were so close this time, and it starts with you making a lighthearted comment about the mess. Joke all you want, but there's no business quite as messy as a girl raped at 6 and left alone in the back of a car to pull on panties with trembling fingers. So excuse me if the only thing I see in the mess of your semen is haven, because the fact that I am not trying to scrub this out from under fingernails like dried blood is proof you have already taught me that men do not have pain etched into palm like privilege, and that to touch is not always to hurt. Anyone who claims that healing is a journey is kidding themselves. There's no one start or end point, no linear path, and sanctuary from the storms often manifests itself in places that look like a lion's den at first glance. For me, sleeping in sheets stained with your cum is the closest I've ever come to feeling like all I need is the folds of this fabric to forge something of myself again. When you're having sex with a broken girl, rule number 1 is you don't fuck to fix. In daylight, when the currents and tides of the day lure us apart momentarily, it is then I am forced to admit that sex with you is not therapy, but it's a close second, and I'll be damned if it doesn't feel better. And I know there are moments when I flinch under fingertips that in my mind are no longer yours, and I'm sorry. But I am still learning to discern certain subtleties between the exploration and colonization of my body, but you are no Columbus. The sad truth, darling, is that I have lived with ghosts in my skin and my sock drawer longer than I have had my period, longer than I have been able to ride my bike without training wheels. There are no credits that can be expected to start rolling, no expiration date on this kind of coping. There are days when I am less stardust than sawdust, less survivor than victim, but that does not mean that this reclamation of my own body is any less eternal. And this slightly buzzed fuck with Harry Potter playing in the background, this momentary investment in a long-term endeavor, this whisper in my ear reminding me that I am so goddamn beautiful, this is how it starts. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. So the next part, excuse me, I always get emotional. It doesn't matter who's here. You guys are amazing. We can just do an informal conversation. I think this is a difficult conversation anyway, and so instead of being very formal and asking moderated questions, I'll see if you guys have any questions. If you don't, I'm happy to ask some questions too. But we are here. These people are here as resources. We can talk about how the book was made. We can talk about their personal journeys. If you guys would like to share more about those. If you would like to share something, you're certainly welcome to. Anyone?
Oh, I would just like to say thank you. Everyone that presented it was just completely amazing, and I know it must be very hard to be on that side and to have us here watching these figures, and I just really want to say it was super meaningful, and I really appreciate it.
Yes. I just wondered if there were times you resisted writing about it, if it was something that you turned away from, or what that process was like.
So the question, just for the people in the back, was were there times where you resisted writing it or felt like, how was the process of writing it? Yeah. Anybody?
For me, not just with this piece, with other piece, I'm writing a show about it right now. There are times in your recovery that you are processing this trauma while you're writing it, so it becomes really intense and really painful. I get more flashbacks or actual physical memories of what happened that I have to choose to do self-care and take a break until I feel that I'm strong enough to do it, because otherwise it's not going to be authentic writing, and it's also not going to be healthy for me. So I feel for any survivor or anyone who has trauma, it's so important to know and be aware of yourself and see if something feels wrong. it's wrong.
I have always found it easy to write about these sorts of stories, and I have found it increasingly difficult to put myself in the stories. It is always, I think, easy for me to come up with another main character for my play or another voice in my poem and say, you know, this is such a universal experience. Of course, I can write about it from someone else's point of view. And what I resisted, particularly in my personal writing and in my own journals, that I don't know why I resisted it. No one ever reads them other than me, but it was very difficult to write about it in first person and to really internalize what had happened and to really admit that this was something that I had struggled with for so long.
For a long time, I was trying to write like a memoir of what happened and the things that happened before and after, and I couldn't. And then somehow, after writing this and participating in this, I was able to handle the process a little bit different, a little bit like the editing process that Erin had given us, and almost like put another layer on it. You know, I had the basic outline of the act and the subsequent acts, and then I added the actual factual details. Then I added the chaos that ensues when you don't have control over yourself. And the closer I get, it has to be layered. It's got to be like a lateral and one more because I couldn't regurgitate it whole. It was just too much. And it was like actually self-editing was really vital to the process of getting it out of my system.
For me, it started with the poems. I wrote Worms in the Summer Grass in high school. So I was able to do those small pieces, but I couldn't really face the prose, the whole story, until I was an adult. And I was trying to figure out how to write this book. I thought, no one will want to read this. No one wants to hear about this. And I was trying to figure out, how do I coax the reader into getting into the story enough where they're going to be hooked, where they're going to want to stick it out and find out what happened. And I came up with the idea of a series of nightmares. So my main character struggles with nightmares, and it's actually one of the layers in the story. And then the poems are another layer, and then the story itself. But yeah, I didn't want to write it. But I also looked out there, and I looked out specifically not just to, are there any stories in literature, particularly young adult books, but thankfully there are lots of good books out there, and more every day since the Me Too movement. But I think the voice of male survivors is particularly small. And so if I can do something to help with that, I'd like to do that.
Yeah. For me, I didn't start directly with writing. I also paint, so my first expression of myself about it was painting and painting shadows or with red and black, and really found their own visual way of getting it out. When I first told my dance teacher years ago, when I was a teenager, she wanted me to report, she wanted me to write everything down, and I just couldn't do it. And it took years after that I started painting and I started writing, and the first people that seen my painting and works were my teachers and my closest people in my life. And it became from showing them my paintings to showing them my diaries, and my adopted mom read all my diaries and she knows more than any therapist I ever met. And it was a way of starting to get it out. So it doesn't always have to be a therapist or someone specific. It just needs to be one person that you really trust, that you know that can handle it, and you can ask them before. And that's how you build trust, because I feel the only way to really heal from something like that is to really be able to trust people. Because when a child trust is broken at such a young age, when the brain is not even fully developed at all, and it completely mess up all their attachment issues, and they can't feel safe, and nobody is safe to trust. That's why most people don't report. That's why kids cannot handle stuff like that, because their brain is literally not even developed enough to deal with that. That's why it's our job as adults, as society, to be there for them and to know how to communicate with them. And if you see something that seems suspicious, don't lay back and say whatever is a kid, maybe it's its imagination. It's like there's a way to talk to them. You can paint with them. You can find a way to figure out, because you can save a life. My life wasn't saved, but if I could save someone else, that would make my soul beyond happy.
And adding to that, when I read all your stories, I was like, oh, see, I now have a catalog of information I didn't have before. I'm not a survivor, but it benefited me hugely, because then as someone who works with teens and children, oh, okay, there were definitely some through lines that we saw, some, just a lot of signs we talked about. So I think maybe if more people were open to talking about it, everyone, we would be able to actually fight it. Right now, we're not in a point where we can, because people are so uncomfortable talking about it. So, anybody else have a question?
I wanted to share something. Yes, I am a therapist, and I work with sexual abuse survivors, and I just wanted to share how symbolic this event was, of how different all your stories were, not only in terms of content, but the way you use them to heal, and poem or different poem, diary, letter, which I think is very symbolic of the real healing of this trauma, that there's a lot of misconception also. There's this journey that is for everyone, and we all take, and it goes like this. It's just as different as it was right now, tonight, with your performances. It's very individual. There's no one way of healing, and you find your own way of healing, and finding that it's very hard, because usually we just find guidance and someone tells us how to do it and where to do it. And in your case, if you go to the counselor, when you're a kid, you're not choosing that. You're being put there with this person that, again, you're not choosing. And then that's not your journey, and these people also messed up. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that and really talk about that, how this was a very beautiful example of how healing is very different. And as therapists or friends or parents or humans, that are living among these survivors, it's just important to be compassionate and validate whatever their healing process is, because it's very different for everyone, just like we saw.
And I think that the one question I ask you guys in the book, which I'll ask you now, is what are one or two things that really helped you in recovery? If you could just speak to that for a minute, that'd be great.
I didn't fully recover for a long, long time. Like, I kept putting it off. I would give half-hearted attempts to therapy, like 6 months. Oh, this person just doesn't feel me. And somebody once said, when I started college at 44, I had one of my first instructor was like, every day make a different mistake. And I was like, I don't know why, but something clicked. So I found myself a couple of years later, and I realized I kept making the same mistake over and over again. I would find a new boyfriend to abuse me differently. And 2 husbands and so many abusive partners, I found a trauma counselor. I bit the bullet. I found a trauma counselor, and I just let it all out. And that took 3 years. And then I remember probably the last abusive guy I dated, I said to him, I'm going to be a rain speaker. And he was like, oh my God, why? Because I can, bitch. And then it was like the rest was 2 years ago, I was on one of their commercials, which was for their like fundraising campaign in 2016. And it just popped out of me because it was my absolute truth. It was like when you let go of shame, you're free. And now, sometimes it's a little obnoxious, but I have no shame. Right above my desk, I have 3 letters, NFG. No blanks given. And it's not, I'm a social worker, so of course I give the big F. But I don't give the big F about what society feels about me. I live my truth, I do my thing, and I'm recovered. But I'm recovered on my terms. I couldn't be recovered on my mother's terms or my ex-husband's terms or my kids' terms. I had to recover on my own terms. And it's so funny because I spent 3 hours a week right across the street for 3 years. I was somebody's PhD project, and they only charged me $10 an hour. And I recovered. I just let it go. I couldn't afford it. It wasn't really appropriate. I just did it. It was my time to do it. And I let go of shame, and that's the only reason. I could have saw Freud, but if I didn't let go, it wasn't going to go anywhere. And I saw a PhD candidate, and she needed a project, and God knows I was a project, and there it was. I just let it go. I left it all in her office. And yeah, so just let go.
For me, what helped me the most was being able to not have it a secret anymore. To first tell my closest people, dance teachers, sisters, the closest people in my life. My adopted mom, I shared a lot with her, like I said before. But for me, what helps the most is hugs. I think people are not aware of how healing just basic human compassion can be. I think people get really overwhelmed by this subject, and it's like, oh, no, don't talk to me, go talk to a shrink. It's like, but that's actually hurts survivors so much because it makes us feel more damaged, more different, more isolated. I've been isolated for the majority of my life, but when I just start speaking about it to people that I trust and start wow, cool, they can handle it. And I became a writer, which I had no idea that I was. Only when I started college, I discovered that. And it was a huge epiphany for me because I never thought that that's what I am. I always did acting and dancing. So the people that you let yourself trust, they heal you the most. The people that are just there, the people that just hold you when you cry in the street having a flashback, and they don't care who's watching and I don't care who's watching. I feel like people are not aware enough about what trauma is, what's the symptoms of it. They look at it as something that is strange or scary or wrong, and it's actually the most normal reaction to trauma. People who would not react to trauma, that would be concerning. It's how the body remembers. The body doesn't forget. I will be brave and share that last night, the piece that I wrote gave me a flashback that I was in so much pain that I felt as if I was being raped. It lasted for 10 hours, that I didn't know if physically something was wrong with me. But this is something survivors go through almost every day. And people don't know. People minimize it. People think it's in our head. Move on, forget about it. That's not what it is. The body remembers, the mind remembers, and the soul remembers mostly. So I find it so important to find kind of spirituality. It doesn't have to be God, anything. Just something that you know that is powerful, that gives you hope, that gives you faith. Because without faith, we can't do anything in life. Thanks.
Yeah, and what you just shared, Maya, the body, the mind, the soul. I think that was one of the big takeaways for me. My abuse didn't just happen to my body, and I have lots of facets. I have a mind, I have a heart, I have a soul, and a spirit. So, and many other facets. So my healing and my recovery has to address all of those facets. It's not just trying to address the physical parts. And I unfortunately experienced some of those. That's something that happens when you're sodomized at 4 years old. And I have physical consequences that I had to live with, that my abuser didn't have to live with, that even to this day affect me physically. So that was one takeaway. Another, have you all heard of the ACEs study, Adverse Childhood Experiences? There's an amazing TED Talk on it you should check out. Nadine Burke, yes, amazing. But go to ACEs Too High and look up the test. There's 10 questions. Answer the questions and see where you score. I scored 10 out of 10, unfortunately, on the ACEs test. But if you scroll down below that and go past all the data, there's another set of questions. And that other test is, I think it's 15 questions, and it's about resiliency. What resiliency factors did you have in life? And I think one of the biggest ones for me was belief in a higher power. So that really helped me. And the ACEs study tells me that if I have 6 or more, I'm supposed to end up in a straitjacket or be a mass murderer or this horrible person. But here I am. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 4. I'm a grad school graduate. I'm a published author. And I'm a counselor. And I'm doing something to change what I couldn't change. What happened to me, it happened. But I can't worry about that. I can get up here and I can do this. This is what I can do. I can try to make the world a better place than I found it. And that's what I'm going to do. So those are a couple of my takeaways. We are in a bookstore, so you might want to check out The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk, right? And Healing from Trauma, Jasmine Lee Corey, that book, I highlighted the heck out of that one. That really helped me. That was great.
When I'm thinking about things that helped in my recovery, 3 big ones come to mind. The first one, I was very lucky. I was very privileged. I attended a university that offered incredible counseling services specifically to victims of sexual violence. And I was really lucky. I got matched with a therapist that helped me very much. She really forced me to put in a lot of really important work. Therapy is work. Therapy is really hard. It is more demanding than anything I've ever done. You think you're just going to get to go in and whine for half an hour, and that's not always how it works. So that was really helpful to me, and I do realize that that came from a place of immense privilege. Another thing that was very helpful to me was running. I am a runner, and it was just a very easy way for me. We're talking about how our bodies sort of internalize these traumas. Running was a very easy way for me to be in constant dialogue with my body and to respond to what my body needed and to prove to myself every morning when I, ran around the block that I was in charge of my body and that I was the one running at the pace that I set and that I was the one whose lungs were burning and whose legs were tired and God damn it, y'all, this body is mine. It's a good day. And the third thing that has always been, will always be, in every aspect of my life, not just recovery, but has always been very helpful to me, was the queer community, the non-binary community. We're all here because we think language is powerful, so I would ask you to maybe think about the words you use when you say that these crimes happen to men and women. It happens to far more people than men and women. Gender is so vast and so sprawling. It was so difficult to me for a long time to relate to my perceived womanness, to relate to my queerness. It was so frustrating to feel like I could only relate to those things from a place of pain. I was like, why don't we get to feel joy? But we do. We feel so much joy, and we are such a beautiful, vibrant, and powerful community, and it has been so wonderful to meet so many incredible queer and non-binary survivors who have shared their stories with me and shared some of my burdens sometimes. Yeah, I'm very lucky, I think.
Can we take one more question? Okay. All right. We'll do one more question, and then we'll stay. So if you want to connect with us after, that's fine too. But if anybody has one more question, we can take one more. No? All right. That's all right. So, oh, you do? Go ahead.
Because of your experiences and the shame and pain, and you feel damaged, for each of you, what was the shift that helped you go from victim to not being a victim?
So the question was, what was that moment that helped you get from victim to survivor? I would phrase it as, but however you'd like to.
I was married for 15 years, and it was abusive and violent. And after I ended my marriage, I kept looking for the nugget where I started to allow violence to be part of my everyday relationships. And for a long time, I saw every incident of intimate violence as a separate entity. But then one day I just saw a pattern, that it was the same thing happening over and over again. And even though my ex-husband didn't hold me down and force me sexually, he deprived me sexually. Like he would put conditions on the sexual experience. And I didn't realize for a long time that that's almost as bad, because I still didn't own the sexual experience. And that's the only thing. It's just like Jane said. It's the cornerstone. It's the initial pearl of your survivorhood is owning your sexuality. If someone isn't having a completely reciprocal sexual experience with you, get out of the bed. Get out of the house. Get out of the relationship. Because sex is a communion. And if that's not what's happening, whether it be through deprivation or conditional sexual acts, or someone just not pleasing you to the point where it becomes lopsided, that is sexual abuse. There has to be, sex is a communion, and there has to be a balance of power. And once I could identify that my sexuality never had a balance of power, I could take the step forward. And I did. And now I have to own it. And it's like sometimes, again, my recovery can be obnoxious because I'm loud and I'm a genuinely happy, vibrant person. But like, I own my sex now. And it's like, well, what are you going to do on your vacation? Him. And because it's the nugget that helped me to heal. And maybe it's not always okay for somebody else, but it definitely is perfectly appropriate for me.
For me, again, the people in my life that supported me made me remember who I really am. They would not look at me just as Maya with a flashback, or Maya who doesn't eat, or Maya who is in a crisis. They see me as a spirit with wisdom, as an artist, as an activist. They see me for who I really am. My spiritual community, it's a oneness community that started in India. It's all about accepting everybody and accepting yourself. And the more I'm involved with that and doing meditation daily, it helps me to really connect to who I really am, to my soul, to connect to myself and my creator, and know that I'm more than that. All this other stuff are just the consequences of what happened to me, but it's not who I am.
The easy answer for me is I use a model of recovery that starts with victim, moves to survivor, then adapter and thriver, and overcomer. And I think the adapter and thriver and overcomer can kind of be in whatever order that it needs to be. So that's kind of the easy answer, but I would say I knew it was happening not just to me. I knew it was happening all over the place, and it troubled me that our world was like that. And I wanted to figure out, how do I stop it? What can I do? I'm just me. I don't know how to stop this. And I saw the statistics. Right now, I think there 1 in 4 girls before they turn 18 has experienced sexual assault. 1 in 6 boys before they turn 18. So I am 1 in 6. But right now the numbers are moving towards 1 in 3 and 1 in 5. They're moving in the wrong direction. So I think the Me Too movement, I think this project are good steps forward with that, trying to find a way to turn the tide. But I wanted to find a way to take back what was taken from me. So I guess that was my turning point, was when I could lay down my story and when it affected somebody else and it helped them with their own survivor experience. That's when those paths crossed. That was the turning point for me. So
I feel like I might be a bad person to answer this question, just because I feel like I have a dozen of those moments every day and a dozen breaking moments right after them. Healing is not linear. There's no, I don't think, maybe it's just because I'm younger and still working through it, but I don't think there's going to be a point where I'm like, yes, check, I have recovered and we're done with that, thank God. Don't think, next, don't think that's going to happen. But one moment that does stand out, and one moment that I do think shifted the tide a little bit, even if it wasn't just like, oh yeah, well I fixed this is great, was my senior year in high school. I alluded a little bit earlier to how easy it was for me to write about things when I kind of took my name off of it, and when I could just sort of, because I've been a writer ever since I knew what that meant, I think, and so it was very believable to people, I think, to be like, oh yeah, like Jane came up with this story, Jane is always writing stories, Jane is always coming up with things. It was very easy to distance myself from it, and I had the opportunity to write a one-act play that my theater class put on, and the show was about a girl in high school dealing with sexual assault, and we put it on at a statewide conference, and so far more people than just my classmates got to see it. And it was one of the few student-written plays at the festival, and it was the first time in my life after we had run the play that someone else, a girl my age, came up to me and thanked me for writing something. I had never had that experience of someone saying, like, thank you for this. You have given me something. And that was, whew, talk about intoxicating. That was a crazy feeling. That was a feeling that just filled me with a lot of solidarity and a lot of strength to realize that, you know, we keep on, I think. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's getting close to our time, and I want you guys to know that I really appreciate you all coming out. I was like, I hope somebody comes. So it's really nice to have you all here. And we have books for sale. And did we check on the 10% off for donated copies? Okay, awesome. So if you would like to buy a second copy to donate to Canva, we'll collect them. Should they collect them at the desk or bring them back to me? I can bring them back. I can collect. Okay. Please, if you'd like to do that, please feel free. And otherwise, there's also postcards if you'd like to not buy a book. And even if you don't plan on buying a book, please, if you want to come up and talk more, please do so. Okay? Thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys so much.